Coming up next on the Bill Gephardt Show podcast.
You can hold to principle and still find common ground with the other side and move forward on that common ground. That is the Utah way, and that's what we need in Washington.
Independent U.S. Senate candidate Evan McMullin on his quest to replace Mike Lee. Why the man who won more than 20% of Utah's votes in the 2016 presidential election says he'll be a uniter, not a divider, in what he calls the Utah way. The Bill Gephardt Show podcast brought to you this week by these supporters of local journalism. Reams Food Stores, where you can now order online and pick up curbside in Sandy and West Jordan. City Creek Mortgage, where Mortgage Mike says, expect to save money. The attorneys of Robert J. DeBryan Associates. When you're injured, your attorney matters. Steve's Automotive Specialists, hiring the best mechanics in the business and paying top wages to get them. ES Solar, Utah's premier solar electric contractor. Save money now with clean, safe solar power. All Utah Plumbing, Heating, and Air, where owner John Holland and his rock-solid team stand behind their white glove service with the best warranties in the business. Snyder Brothers Meat, Salt Lake Valley's finest full-service meat market, is now delivering. And by special guest sponsor Legacy RV, powered by the Haugen Group. Joining us now on the podcast is Evan McMullin. Now, he's an independent candidate for Utah Senator. You know his name because he ran for president once, and he did a pretty good job, I think. Nearly 22% of Utah votes in the race for president in 2016 when he ran as an independent against Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And Evan, you were only on the ballot in 11 states and got nearly 1 million votes nationwide, I believe. And in 14 states, broke write-in records when you weren't actually listed. You were just there as a write-in. Now running as an independent for Senate in an attempt to win the seat now occupied by Republican Senator Mike Lee in the 2022 general election. Welcome to the podcast, Evan McMullin.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me, Bill.
Sure. Now, it has been a while since we last chatted. It was during the 2016 presidential campaign. You would definitely call yourself a conservative, I believe, and you are an ex-Republican, I believe. And this Senate bid as an independent is a strategy. Am I right about that?
You are, but there are deeper reasons for it, of course. And look, I was registered as a Republican until a couple of days before I launched this campaign as an independent. Yes, I still consider myself a conservative, although not necessarily the way people define it these days. I'm more of a Lincolnian or a Lincoln conservative, or for those who are interested in political philosophy.
Yes, help me with that. Is that more like the Republican I recognized from, I don't know, 20 or 30 or 40 years ago?
Absolutely. Or a Republican, consistent with what the party was established to do back in the 1850s, which was to extend the opportunity of America to all Americans. And of course, in order to do that, it fought against slavery. It wanted every American to have a chance to participate in our economy and to receive a good education. That was Lincoln's vision. When I think about the Republican Party and what it was then and what it should be going forward, that's what I think of. When I think of myself as a conservative, I think of myself as a Lincoln conservative for those reasons.
Well, now it seems like it's anything that is taxed is not good. We should always lower the taxes. It seems the party has changed. Frankly, I don't think I've changed a whole lot. I think the party has changed. And so what are you fighting against or for?
Yeah, well, look, of course, the party has changed a lot. I think we can all recognize that on whatever side of the political aisle you are, or wherever you think the party should go from here. I think most of us recognize that the party that nominated Mitt Romney, for example, for U.S. president is not the same Republican Party as now.
Precisely.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's very clear. It's in the numbers. I question whether there's room for people like me inside the Republican Party any longer. But look, I'm running as an independent, Bill, because I think that's the kind of leadership that the country needs. It's consistent with Utah's way. Look, we have a brand of leadership here in Utah that holds to principle, but still finds common ground to solve problems. That's the way we do things here. We have leaders like that, and many Republicans, we have Republican leaders like that, and there are Democrats like that as well. But the country needs that. Our politics are broken. The politics in Washington are broken. We have all of these mounting challenges facing the country. Many of them are impacting our quality of life here in Utah now. And this kind of politics, the politics of extremism and division, it's just not getting the job done. We're not overcoming these problems. They're just piling on top of each other. And so that's why I think we've got to have the Utah way in Washington. That's the way we're going to solve problems, is by having leaders who will work with either side to get good things done, stand up against the extremes on either side, and serve Utah's interests, reflect our values, and help the country get on track. And that's what I'm running to do.
Don't tell me twice about a broken political system. That seems to me precisely what it is. Evan McMullin, who's now running as an independent for Senate in 2022, trying to unseat Republican Mike Lee. We'll be right back, and we'll talk about strategy. Today's podcast brought to you in part by these fine sponsors. Reams Food Stores, where you can now order online and pick up curbside in Sandy and West Jordan. City Creek Mortgage, where Mortgage Mike says, expect to save money. The attorneys of Robert J. DeBryan Associates. When you're injured, your attorney matters. And our special guest sponsor, Ace Handyman Salt Lake East. Later in the podcast, we'll be talking to Brent Anderson, the head handyman himself.
I think my husband's having a heart attack.
We're going to need to transfer your husband to another location with available ICU beds.
But you could just see him right here.
All of our ICU beds are full.
No, just see him. He needs help right now. We'll fall asleep, baby. Almost there.
He's not breathing very well.
You're gonna make it. He's gonna make it right.
We're talking with Evan McMullin, who is the independent candidate for Senate, trying to unseat Mike Lee, the multi-term Republican for the state of Utah. Now, you're running as an independent. You were formerly a Republican, and I want to talk about strategy. Is there a worry that you might not beat Mike Lee, or because of a certain Republican machine here in Utah, and therefore you're running as an independent?
This is the thing, Bill.
Okay.
A majority of Utahns want to see Mike Lee replaced. His approval rating is at about 45%.
That's true. Yep.
Only about 17% of Utahns strongly support his leadership. And so a majority of Utahns want to make a change. The challenge is that those Utahns are in different political tribes. So they're principled Republicans, they're independents, or they're Democrats. And they agree that it's time to make a change, but because they're in different political lanes and tribes, it's difficult for them to do that. So I'm running as an independent because I think that's consistent with our way of leadership here in Utah, our better way of leadership, which is a more selfless, compassionate, independent kind of leadership. And that's what it's going to require, or that's what's required in order to unite these groups in order to make this change, which we really need as a state. We need to make a change because we've got to have someone who's more effective at solving problems in Washington than Mike Lee. But this is the only way to do it, and that's why I'm running like this as an independent.
It's true, because in the state of Utah, unless you're running for mayor of a large city, it's hard to win, generally speaking, as a Democrat. But it seems to me a lot of Democrats are pretty frustrated they have been for a long time, about the way things are going in the state of Utah. Are you thinking as an independent as a conservative independent, drawing some of those Democrats over to your side? I mean, there's even people were encouraged not long ago by some major Democrats in the state to switch party for the primary from Democrat to Republican, even though they remain that way, just as a strategy to try to win something. With all that, I'm just wondering, are you going to be able to attract some maybe not so liberal Democrats?
Look, in order for us to be successful, we need to build a coalition that includes Republicans, Democrats, independents, and third-party voters. I think we can do it. And I've had a number of conversations across the state. I've had, I've seen the data. I've looked at this closely. I think that there is a coalition here. By the way, this is the same coalition that supports Senator Romney. And it includes
Precisely. That's
Democrats, and independents. It's not that I'm trying to create something new here. It exists.
Yes.
It exists, and we should be proud of it. And yes, the purpose of my campaign is to strengthen that coalition and to mobilize it for this election. And I'm optimistic that we'll be able to do it.
Okay. So am I, frankly. But give me an example of something you might say to a Democrat that would get them to say, yeah, this time I'm going to vote for Evan McMullin. Look,
this is the thing. This is the beauty of our situation right now in the country. The downside, the challenge is that we're so divided. We're not solving problems. We're becoming weak as a nation. We're falling behind China economically and militarily. Most military experts believe that if we were in a war against China right now, it would win. I mean, we're falling behind as a country, and I think we're in some ways falling behind as a state too, because again, we just don't have more effective leadership in Washington. But one thing that unites us all, or unites everyone in this coalition that we're building and strengthening, is a desire to commit to truth, for example.
Wouldn't that be nice? You know what? Just truth. You got me. Go ahead. Tell me about truth.
So truth, that there are facts, that 1 + 1 = 2. Or how about that our founding ideals are critical to our security and prosperity going forward? Have we been perfect in living up to them? No, but they are our goal. We reach for them, and we're rewarded as a nation as a result when we embrace the ideals that were enshrined in our Declaration of Independence. Yes, again, we're not perfect on those things, but we have to be committed to those things and pursuing those things, their realization in our country. That leads to strength and prosperity for us all increasingly. So that's another thing. The other thing I would say is, look, I think a lot of people recognize, Bill, in this state, that our democratic republic is at risk. There are people who want to destroy its institutions in the service of one man or one group of Americans, rather than protecting our way of government, our system of government, so that we all share in the benefits. And I speak of liberty for all and justice for all. That's what our system of government, although imperfect, is there to provide. Yes, do we need to reform it in many ways? 100%. But there are people who want to just take down and destroy our system of government. And then there are those of us who want to preserve our democratic republic because we know how important it is for liberty and justice for all in America. And so that, I think, is very unifying among at least this group of Utahns, and I think more broadly across the country. And so that's a message that I think can bring everyone together.
We are speaking with Evan McMullin. He is running for the Senate for the state of Utah as an independent in the 2022 election. And I'm going to talk about the, I don't know, what do you call him? The leader of the Republican Party and what Evan thinks of Donald Trump when we come back. Today's podcast brought to you in part by these fine sponsors. Steve's Automotive Specialists, hiring the best mechanics in the business and paying top wages to get them. ES Solar, Utah's premier solar electric contractor. Save money now with clean, safe solar power. All Utah Plumbing, Heating, and Air, where owner John Holland and his rock-solid team stand behind their white glove service with the best warranties in the business. We're speaking with Evan McMullin. He is the independent, formerly Republican, running for the Senate in the state of Utah, trying to unseat Mike Lee in the 2022 election. We've talked about a number of things which would be anti-Trump, and you know what? You're in for it, Evan, because anybody who stands up to Trump gets targeted in the harshest of terms. You're a Marxist, a rhino, Republican in name only, a satanic pedophile. But you're the one who's gonna go up against a lot of that stuff, arguably. And what do you think? You ready for that? You ready for that kind of targeting?
Oh, well, I'm used to the arrows. I've been absorbing them now for about 5 years. But look, I think people made various decisions in the last elections about who to vote for. I think there are a lot of us who had to make some tough decisions, and we may have come down on this side or that side of the presidential race in 2022 or 2020 or 2016,
Yep.
certainly.
Yep.
But I think a lot of us feel that we had to make tough choices and we didn't like our options, but we did the best we could. I get that. People have their reasons for doing various things. What I think we can, or most of us can agree on, is that we need a better way forward. We have too many challenges in this country that are not getting solved. We have wild things like the insurrection on January 6th happening that threaten even the peaceful transition of power from one president to the next. We are on thin ice right now as a country. It seems as though at times these days that the country is coming apart.
It does.
You have increasingly, people are talking about, I hesitate to even mention it because it sounds so extreme, but increasingly you have people talking about secession and civil war and a plurality of either party. The University of Virginia just had a poll recently that showed a plurality of either party thinks that secession is something that should be considered. I mean, we are coming apart as a country. I don't think some of those extreme things will happen, but what I do think is that in the meantime, we're failing to govern ourselves and life is getting harder, whether it's inflation, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's the high cost of healthcare, whether it's here in Utah, a lack of water. Cities are trucking in water because they've run out, or it's the air quality. Our kids' soccer games over the summer were canceled because of air quality, because we had the worst air quality for a couple of days than anywhere else in the world, including New Delhi and Beijing. And if you've been to either of those places,
I know.
that's saying a lot. We got to solve problems here. And so no matter how people voted or what they think of Biden or Trump or anybody else, I think most of us here in Utah can agree we need a better way forward. My view is that we have a better way of leadership here in Utah. We call it the Utah way. Let's take that to Washington. Let's work with both sides to get things done. And let's stand up to the extremes that are getting in the way. And let's get this country on track.
Okay, let's talk about that. You're running as a conservative, an independent conservative. You've never held elective office, but you're certainly familiar with Washington as a former CIA officer and as a policy advisor on Capitol Hill in Washington. So there are real problems to solve, some of which you've talked about, but there's COVID, supply chain, inflation, climate change you touched on, immigration, Middle East, something I'll bet you're an expert on as a former CIA officer. But in order to do that, you have to run and you have to win. Is that going to happen?
I think we'll win. I really do. Look, a majority of Utahns want to make a change in this election. They would like to replace Mike Lee. He no longer represents our values or our interests or our way of doing things in Utah. He's become a poster child for the divisive politics that now are tearing our country apart. He gets little done. He spends more time on performative obstructionism than he does on working with people from both sides of the aisle to get things done. And we just need a change. I mean, I had this sense, Bill, I don't know if you did or maybe your listeners did over the summer. It just seemed here in Utah like too many of our nation's challenges and our own challenges were just compounding. I mean, again, the pandemic, the lack of water, air quality being terrible, and then inflation to boot, and so many other things. The high cost of healthcare.
I don't think we're being told the truth. Quite honestly, I really don't. I don't think our leaders are always telling us the truth with regard to COVID and the conspiracy stuff and the politicization of that. Just for example, thoughts.
Absolutely. Look, our leaders have got to tell the truth to the American people about the effectiveness, for example, of the vaccines and their safety. That is being vaccinated is the fastest way as a country that we can get our economy back on track, that we can get people back to work. That is what we need. That's the fastest way to do it. And we have leaders casting doubts about, the safety and the efficacy of the vaccines. And we have others who are not. We have others who are doing the responsible thing, but plenty are not. And I think it's just a tremendous disservice, obviously, that is weakening our country. I mean, our adversaries are watching us and laughing at us.
Yeah, I know.
As we fail to do the obvious thing to protect ourselves, to get our economy back on track.
It's embarrassing. All right, economy, supply chain. What are we going to do about that? Have you looked at that a little bit?
I have, and just in general, inflation, which is a related issue. I think we've got to get people back to work. I am concerned that we're spending a lot of money right now, that is so much that it's incentivizing some people not to go back to work. Some people have health issues, and so they're concerned about going back to work because, again, people aren't being vaccinated. And so, in some places, and so that's an issue. I get all that, but I do think that, we've got to support those who truly need the help. I'm totally on board with that. But I do think our support from the government that has come because of the pandemic has gotten to the point where it is incentivizing some people not to go back to work, and they need to go back to work. And what's happening because of that is that it's decreasing our productivity, which means there are less goods on the market. And meanwhile, people still have money in their pockets. So it's less productivity. And
Evan McMullin, you sound like you're negotiating with yourself.
Well, I'm not. I'm just saying that when people are home and not working and not producing things, and they have money in their pockets, and so demand is still high, what happens is that there's a huge inflation problem. And right now, I live in Utah County. You go get a cheap fast food meal isn't so cheap anymore. If you need to buy a car, that's not so cheap. Everything is costing more. And a big part of that is that people aren't going back to work, so productivity is low. Meanwhile, they've still got government money in their pockets. And that is leading to inflation that's making it really hard on middle-class families like my own.
Yeah. You know what? That was unfair. You're not negotiating with yourself. You're trying to strike a balance here, I think, and you're not particularly being extremist. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Sure. Things. Yeah. Well, I'm an anti-extremist. Certainly, I like facts and considering what real causes are. But look, yes, on the economy, we've got to make some tough choices, and I think we need to really think hard about where we're sending federal dollars to support people. Do they need them? If they need them, we ought to support people. But we've got to get people back to work. And one idea I have, Bill, is that, instead of paying people who can go back to work more money to stay home, we could provide an incentive bonus, for example, for them to return to work. You go back to work, you get a bonus, and you continue on, and you add more productivity, which will put more goods on the market and decrease inflation, which is something we really need to do.
This sounds totally moderate. And by the way, this is not, if you were to prevail, this is not the first time a Republican turned independent. Well, I guess it would be. But what I'm trying to get to is conservative Republican Orrin Hatch, the statesperson, a senator from Utah, I think he was longer serving, was getting in line or working with Senator Kennedy, a liberal Democrat from Massachusetts. And the things you're talking about sound like negotiation, which, my old man always used to say politics is just the art of compromise as opposed to the art of extremism. What do you think of that?
Well, your father was a wise man. Edmund Burke, who was a founding father, if you will, of conservatism, he said that compromise was inherently conservative because it led to moderation and therefore was a counter to extremism. But somehow in the modern iteration of conservatism, in the minds of many, not in my mind, but in the minds of many, you can make no compromises, and if you do, then you've sold out in some way. But look, we live in a big country with 330 million people, and everybody's got a different idea about everything, and we share the country, and there's no way that's going to change, and if not through some sort of terrible civil war, which hopefully most of us do not want. And so we share this country, and so because we share this country, like we share our neighborhoods and our streets and all of that, we have to work with each other. And that is fundamentally conservative. Working with each other is fundamentally conservative. The other thing I wanted to say, and I think you know this, Bill, and I think this is part of the Utah way. You can take two groups of people who have very, very hard disagreements on issues that they care about a lot. And they will still be, you can still find common ground. There are so many examples of that happening here in Utah. It's happened in time. There are compromises between this side and that side on various, difficult issues. The thing is, you can hold to principle and still find common ground with the other side and move forward on that common ground. That is the Utah way, and that's what we need in Washington. It's certainly what we've got to have from our representatives in Washington. That's the way we do it here in Utah. And Bill, if you'll just humor me for a second.
I am humoring you. Yes, this is great. This is what we've been doing for more than 200 years in the country. Go ahead, Evan.
Yeah. So there's a reason why we do things differently in Utah, where there's a reason why we have leadership that holds to principle but still finds common ground. When my great-great-grandfather, I think 2 or 3 grades, came to Utah over 150 years ago, he arrived in the Salt Lake Valley, a place that all kinds of traders and trappers and people in the gold rush they'd traveled through this area and said, it's beautiful, but too harsh. We got to move on. My ancestors and the ancestors of our state came here over 150 years ago, and it was this harsh environment that they needed in order to find freedom and opportunity for themselves. And no one else dared to except for the native communities, and there were a handful in what is now Utah, but in terms of the Europeans and the Americans that came to Utah, no one else dared to try to set up civilization here, try to set up their communities here. But the ancestors of our state did, because they needed to, and they realized, and this is the point here, Bill, they realized that the only way they could survive and thrive in this desert is if they worked together. And that's what we did, and that's what they did. And I think that still informs our way of leadership, our way of life here in Utah.
It sounds so non-extremist. That's what I grew up with. At least I thought I did. We get into these extreme things from time to time. Anyway, I want to come back with the last segment and ask you a couple of more questions about voting, about the system with voting. And we're talking to Evan McMullin, independent candidate for the U.S. Senate for 2022. We'll be right back. Today's podcast brought to you in part by these fine sponsors. Snyder Brothers Meat, Salt Lake Valley's finest full-service meat market, is now delivering. And by special guest sponsor Legacy RV, powered by the Haugen Group. And Ace Handyman Salt Lake East. And now let's talk to the head handyman himself. That Utah is experiencing record growth right now. People are moving in from all over the place, let alone our constantly growing families. That means a lot more work for heating and cooling people, concrete people, home builders, plumbers, all of that stuff. And what is also increasing for people who are down the middle of all that stuff or do a little bit of everything, and that's a handyman. This guy's a professional handyman we have here. His name is Brent Anderson. He's with Ace Handyman Services of Salt Lake City East. Welcome to the program, Brent.
Thank you.
Tell me how you do all that stuff, don't you? All that.
We do a little bit of everything. The honey-do list is our sweet spot. We love to do drywall and painting and just anything to help upgrade your appearance of your home, make it more serviceable for a home office type situation. Anything we can do to help out the homeowner. We really want to be their home ally.
Now I know, but you talked about all of these like drywall contractor, which you're not. You'll do a little bit of light plumbing. I know you do concrete work. You'll probably repair roofs. You probably do a little bit of everything. What are the limitations on what you do?
Really, we try to stay away from inside the wall. So if you have a kitchen sink or a faucet or something that you needed replaced, we'd love to do that for you, garbage disposal. But if you get into more of, I got a leaky pipe in the wall, we're going to need to have you have a plumber come out and make sure that that's handled correctly. And then, of course, we'll be happy to do the drywall patch for you after that and paint. But we're not licensed to do any plumbing or electrical work. So we're just replacing things, upgrading fixtures, that sort of thing. I know there's a lot of dated homes in the valley. We've done some stuff at my place, just updating some of the lighting and fixtures. So we're certainly happy to do that.
You'll replace a plug, but you won't replace a service panel type thing.
Exactly.
You might repair
if it's an electrical type situation. If you're getting into the circuit box or whatever, that's an electrician's.
You might replace the chips in a driveway, but you're not going to pick up a driveway and put down a new one type thing.
No, we're limited in that factor, just mainly because we really want to be able to be a week out. Somebody calls today, Tuesday, we're able to show up on early next week and take care of your problem for you.
Now you might come out and just change a fixture, or if I've got a number of fixtures or something, I know you have services where it's not really a contract, but you'll come out for a half a day. You have rates for a half a day or a full day.
Yeah, we have a half day package and a full day package, and really those are the best value, because we have to charge a little bit of a first hour differential to get the craftsman there to help pay for their vehicle and their time and travel. It's a good value to just go ahead and have them come out for half a day, or even if you can find enough little projects for a full day, to really kind of reduce that hourly rate and maximize your benefit.
Thing that's different about you are a Gephardt approved company, which means I've investigated your background and I know a lot about you, so you're a trusted company. And I also know who the people are you bring on that you send into people's homes. Who are they? How do you?
We only hire the best of the best. We do a complete background check. We check their references, and we also do a drug screen. We really want to ensure that the folks that we're sending into your home, they won't get hired unless I would send them to my home. And to send them into people's homes and businesses, we want to make sure that we have the highest quality, safest individuals that we can get our hands on, and we've been very fortunate to do that.
I think the key word is hired, because there are handyman services where there is the boss, and when someone calls up and says, I need a fixture replaced, the guy calls up a freelancer who's sitting at home to go replace the fixture. These guys are your actual employees.
These are all W-2 employees. They work for me. I'm an independent franchise owner for the ACE handyman service, and we really strive to get quality people, and we're also able to, if something God forbid goes wrong with the situation, we have other folks we could send as well if there's a particular emergency arises or something. It gives us a lot more flexibility to have a company that has multiple craftsmen available rather than the individual that may or may not be available.
That's your idea, I think. But Ace Handyman Services, what is that's a franchise operation, right?
Yes, we are a franchise. A wonderful company called Handyman Matters out of Colorado was acquired by Ace Hardware a couple of years ago. And in doing my due diligence, I had a friend that owned a Handyman Matters franchise. And when I talked with her in Dallas about it, she said, "Hey, Brent, we've been purchased by Ace, and now we have the big Ace brand behind us, which is just a fabulous marketing tool to ensure that that folks understand that we are the trusted name in hardware, and now we're the trusted name in your home service."
All right, we can find your website at acehandymanservices.com, right?
Yep, go to the website, punch in your zip code, and it'll give you the appropriate office phone number to call.
Ace Handyman Services, that's right. And the boss is Brent Anderson. There he is. Thanks for joining us, Brent.
Thank you.
The COVID-19 vaccine will save American lives if enough people take it.
The vaccines were developed quickly and safely because we cut red tape and bureaucracy, not corners.
The vaccine is up to 90% effective. No vaccines are 100% effective, but they still work.
More than 1 million Utahns have been vaccinated, and we need you to get the vaccine too.
Talk to us.
Talk to us.
Talk to us.
Hable con nosotros.
Talk to us. We got it, and we want you to get it.
We are speaking with Evan McMullin. He is, as you know by this point, certainly the independent candidate for U.S. Senate in 2022, trying to unseat Mike Lee. And I want to talk about voting. It seems to me that in the state of Utah, we are the example of safe voting when it comes to mail-in. If I'm not mistaken, we are the first or one of the first. There has been no question that this was in Utah, it was and throughout the country, but let's just talk about Utah. It was certainly a fair election with the ballots counted properly. There was no noticeable voter fraud whatsoever. And yet we have some people in Utah, some Republicans who think we should audit this like they've audited in Arizona and some others, I guess just to take away the credibility for the election. So in order to prosecute your agenda, Evan McMullin, you need to win. But we have to have a voting system that is credible. Thoughts?
Mm-hmm. We certainly do. Look, there's plenty to be proud about when it comes to elections in Utah. As you point out, you can vote by mail. Every registered voter gets a mail-in ballot. You can vote early in person. You can vote on election day. I mean, look, that's what government should do. Government should make it easy for people who are constitutionally entitled to vote to do so securely, not make it more difficult. And these spurious challenges to our elections now coming here to Utah, which I hate to see that poison among us, because we don't need that here. We've got secure elections, and the government makes it easy for people who are entitled to vote and to do it securely. So we don't need that here. But why are they bringing it here? They're bringing that poison here to Utah because they're part of a broader far-right effort to undermine faith in our democratic republic. And they do that because they have lost confidence in their own ability to compete in elections. And rather than make reforms and changes in order to allow themselves to compete, they would rather tear down our system of government. It's like if your favorite baseball team just couldn't win and they just decided to cheat or tear down the rules. That's no fun for anyone, and it destroys the game. So we can't have that. And that, in this case, the game is our democratic republic, which ensures our liberty, and we can't afford to lose it. So, but that's what they're trying to do. And my recommendation to them, Bill, to Republicans, and look, I want Republicans to thrive and succeed and offer healthy leadership to the country. My recommendation to them is to, if they're committed to our founding values and their leadership reflects that, they will be able to compete electorally. And that's the way to do it. Not tearing down confidence in our systems, not trying to destroy the systems or overturn our elections. That's not the way to do it.
If you prevail in a year from now, just as a final note, if you prevail in a year from now, what's the first thing you're gonna do?
Well, there's so many things, but I am very focused on lowering the cost of healthcare. I think that's got to be done. I want to strengthen our democratic republic so that those who seek to tear it down cannot. I want to do things so that we can have clean air and sufficient water here in Utah. I think we've got to take steps urgently on that front. I think we've got to deal with inflation and the overspending that Washington is doing. It's a big problem. Both Republicans and Democrats are adding tremendously to our national debt, and it's adding to inflation. It's making it very difficult for middle-class families and for families who struggle financially to make ends meet. And we've just got to do something about that. So those are among the things I'll be focused on if we prevail, and I'm optimistic that we will.
Well, you're talking like a moderate, and this has been an awful lot of fun and very informative chatting with you here for the past hour, and I appreciate it. Evan McMullin, independent candidate for the U.S. Senate for 2022. Hope to see you again very soon.
Looking forward to it, Bill. Thank you.
Bye-bye. That'll do it for this edition of the Bill Gephardt Show podcast. For breaking news 24/7, check out GephardtDaily.com.